A good morning to all of you. Welcome to Kepler Day 2025, a very important event for us at Kepler. I would like to thank the presence of each analyst, each investor, associates, clients, and partners that are present here in the XP auditorium, and thank you who are accompanying us online. It is a great privilege to count upon your interest in our company. To begin the event, I will quickly go over the agenda for today so that you will know which is the content you will hear, and so you can get ready to interact at that moment when we will have that moment of interaction for all of those who are here and those who accompany us online. You will be able to pose your questions. We're going to begin with the Kepler Vision, where our CEO, Bernardo Nogueira, will explain how Kepler has gone through this moment in the market, speak about our investment thesis, speak about the building blocks of the company's strategy. So Bernardo will begin offering you that Kepler Vision, enabling everybody to know how Kepler has navigated through this market moment, looking at the company's strategic plan. Ensuing this, for those who were here in the year 2024, for those who were present with us in Kepler Day 2024, you must have seen that on that day, we announced the company's strategic plan for 2030. Our executives, Fabiano Schneider, Murilo Schneider, will update that strategic plan, the actions and the results that were put in place already in 2025, and which are the next steps to consolidate that strategic plan that is very important for the company, with a view towards the year 2030, with a view to strengthening our leadership and connect agribusiness to the strategies while they connect the markets. We will have a very interesting moment that we already fostered in the year 2024, where we bring guests that are references in agribusiness, people with a great deal of context to enrich our event. We did that last year. This year, we will count upon people with an extensive knowledge of the market. We have Julia Rizzo from Morgan Stanley, Antonio Cajer, a global executive in agribusiness, João Dumencel from Tres Tentos, and Felipe Michiato from São Martino. Doubtlessly, they will further enrich our content with their knowledge, offering us their perspective, analysis, and how they look at the present day agribusiness scenario. After this, we will speak about our figures. Our CFO, Renato Arroyo, will translate the presentations of our executives as part of the strategic plan, translate everything into figures, how this reflects in the company's results, the performance the company has had in the last few years and presently. Without a doubt, this is a moment of great interest for analysts who follow up on the company and for those who invest and believe in the company's investment thesis. And finally, for the closing of the event, we will have the interactive part, where those of you who are following us online can send in your questions. If we have time, we will answer all the questions. If this is not possible, our IR team will send the answers after the event. For those of you who are in the XP auditorium, offering us the privilege of your presence, you can interact, pose your questions, and speak about your perspectives. Doubtlessly, this is one of the best moments for interaction. To begin, I invite our CEO, Bernardo Nogueira, to speak about the Kepler Vision. Well, good day, everybody. It's an enormous pleasure to have you here. I tend to say that Kepler Day is for people who really love Kepler but don't work at the company. It is wonderful to have you here, some very old friends. And I would like to begin today. Well, we've been hearing a great deal of news about agribusiness here and there. We're going to speak about that, but it's important to put things in perspective. We do get distracted with so much news. We're bombarded by news, usually bad news from the media. But what is Brazilian agribusiness about, and where is it inserted? It is the most competitive agribusiness in the world. In the last 20 years, it is the best on the planet. It grows 100% more than the average worldwide rate of growth. It has enormous protagonism and unequaled competitiveness. Now, it's here to stay and will remain here. What we did in the last Kepler days, well, you're privileged here because I'm going to offer you a summary of the last 4 Kepler days in 5 minutes. What underpins all of this? How does this impact Kepler, and how does it impact the industry? In the 2022 Kepler Day, we spoke about this phenomenon of Brazil, something that only exists in Brazil, where we have 2 harvests in summer, and only soybean in Brazil until the year 2000 would take 150 days. It was either soybean or corn, like in United States, Ukraine, or Russia. You would choose one harvest for the year. That in the year 2000. Since that time, because of genetic improvement, selection that began in Paraná and now throughout Brazil, we have the possibility of having 2 harvests. Brazil grows a great deal in production. It grows little in area. 40% of the national territory is under production with 2 harvests. We have shortened those 150 days of the soybean cycle. This has gone to 130, 120. We produce soybeans in 100 days. And in January, with heavy rainfall, we can also plant corn. This is something unique to Brazil. Argentina, Canada doesn't have that because it has the winter. This gives us enormous competitiveness. Everybody wants to have soybean, corn. The prices are compressed, but Brazil is in a better position. We can use the same tractor, the same earth, the same workers for our second harvest, which brings about enormous competitiveness. And there's a demand for our sector for machines, a demand for speed. When you have this scenario, you don't sit and wait for the harvest to come. You have to speed up this process, have a fast harvest, and of course, this is demanding. We can't create bottlenecks. We have to have ever larger equipment. And this is it, Fabiano. Here we see our dryers. 20 years ago, the maximum was 100 tons an hour. Nowadays, we work at 300 tons an hour with greater added value, once again, because of this demand for speed. This is a phenomenon for agribusiness, very unique to Brazil. We spoke about the deficit of storage, structurally, that logistic gap that Brazil has. Now, Brazil has problems that date back 500 years. They have always been a problem, and we have learned to coexist with them. The storage deficit, which is that black curve, orange is production. Now, you can see that in the year 2016, the deficit was minor. We were very close to being able to store the entire production. So this is a new phenomenon that dates back 10 years, partly because of that deficit. There is a demand for storage. In 2024, 2025, we see a drop in the sale of tractors. sprayers, everything is very fragmented, but we're selling more in 2025, more dryers, more cleaning machines than in 2022, 2023, precisely because of that deficit. The margins are lower. We have São Martinho here that is pressuring us. They need to close the project. The chairman is here as well. So we need to work with good accounts, but there is a demand. This is a priority. And storage in the last 10 years, that was always necessary in the story of humankind. With agriculture, you had to store your production, has become something critical in Brazil. We clearly see investments in storage. 2026 will be a difficult year for agribusiness. I don't want to ruin the surprise, but it will be difficult for agribusiness. We have an order portfolio that will be higher than when we came into 2024. So agribusiness is very good thanks to this and thanks to some additional items. So the volume of business is very good because of this and additional reasons. Now that was 2023 and 2024. We spoke about the history of the last 25 years. Brazilian agriculture is a young agriculture.
Well, if you had the opportunity of living in the United States, if you speak with farmers in Iowa, they'll say, we've been here for 3 generations. My family has been here for 100 years. We don't have that in Brazil. We have group agriculture. In the 1990, we had an enormous migration to the dry areas, semi-arid areas, cerrados in Brazil, 5,000 hectares or 50,000 hectares. There are families with 500,000 hectares. They went up to the semi-arid areas, and this is something quite recent in Mato Grosso in the west. The farmers have made all of these strides and have moved to the Cerrado in only 1 generation. Now, in 2025, I saw this happening. Personally, I saw this happening in Goiás, and we have the Maslow pyramid in this history, that history of farmers that were involved in that migration. And the goal was to purchase land. To purchase land for work. And of course, the cost of land at that time was quite low. Imagine to buy pasture land and to buy land for the cultivation of maize or soybean to transform a pasture area into a crop area. That takes time and quite a bit of money. And that was a basic need. Well, had 50 hectares and one tractor. Now we need 10 or 15 large tractors, equipment once again. The need for equipment to be able to till your land, to increase the pace of the productive process. And what has been happening in the last 5 or 10 years, according to the Maslow pyramid? All the land has been purchased. There is no large fifth frontier. The thick of the process of buying land and cultivating has already taken place. They have bought 10 tractors. Irrigation, which means that our customers in the cotton industry are investing into adding value. And this is what they have been doing in the last few years. That was in 2024. In 2025, there has to be something new to bring you to put the Brazilian agribusiness in context. And what we're going to speak about is city or the cycle. Um, uh, we have 7 years of drought. We have marvelous cycles. We're now going back into another very difficult cycle. And this is interesting. Literally, this is very similar to the World Cup that happens every 4 years. It seems that in agribusiness, we repeat this cycle every 10 years. Perhaps this curve is somewhat hyperbolic based on the price of soybean and productivity. But this is precisely what has happened in Brazil in the last 30 or 40 years. Now, that growth that we observed, 50 million tons growing to 300, and we had these cycles in the midst of that growth. So the message is agribusiness does not stop growing in these difficult moments. There's an increase in pace. Farmers may go bankrupt, but agribusiness does not come to a halt. It continues to work, it continues to progress. And the history of Kepler that you have been following up for some time on, well, we would follow these cycles. Our cyclicality was very similar to that of agribusiness. In 1996, the Kepler family, one of the founders, had to get rid of their company because of their debts. They left the business in 2006. Well, people would get rid of their business because of need. But in 2006, we were in a negative position. Then we had a very strong negative situation, and we are continuing to work. Kepler is number one when it comes to the payout of dividends. We're investing in our future. We have launches as never before. So what you see is a completely transformed business. Now, before speaking about the Kepler transformation, I would like to deep dive into that crisis to underscore how difficult this business is. Well, you see the news from Bank of Brazil, the news of bankruptcy all over. Now, we're going to make images of the agribusiness with this expectation. And the expectation was that what is coming from the sky are penknives and not rain. This is a situation of the farmer. And our expectation, well, and I like analogies, we tend to say that our business is a Boeing with four turbines that have an enormous impact on our joy. And at this moment, three of them have been disconnected. We're flying with a single turbine. And these two analysts here should remain calm. We've already researched and we know that a Boeing can fly with a single turbine. It won't fall. It's a bad feeling to see the smoke coming out, but the plane continues to fly. Now we have the price of commodities, which has an impact not only on the farmer, but the entire chain. Farmers suffer, the cooperatives suffer. There is a constraint on everybody. And well, the price of commodities is the oxygen for the system. Another problem is the investment rate, 30, 150 million reais, 250 million reais, and an interest rate which is the highest in the last 20 years. That turbine, that engine is also disconnected. Another turbine or engine is credit availability. If there is credit availability, things will continue on. And when these three come together, the impact is very strong. Now, which is the engine that is still connected for us? The storage. It goes from necessary to becoming something critical. And this analogy, I think, is a good description of our business. This is Panambi, our plant in the background.
So we add to that Kepler's result. And it's interesting to see how, on a similar cycle for commodity prices and interest rates, and we were here when this happened the last time, our EBITDA was negative at 5%. And now we can come here and talk about the last 12 months. Our guidance talks about the last 12 months, and we're talking about 9 to 16%. So it's a completely changed company, a change that we attribute to three important building blocks. The first one is structural. We have the deficit that helps us. And if you like agribusiness, you have to live with cycles, but we're not talking about cycle here. The storage deficit is structural. And you can run whatever numbers you want. This will still be here in 30 to 40 years. So we have this strength with the demand for the next 30 to 40 years. International business, terminals and ports. So our portfolio has diversified significantly, and rightly so. And this was not in the last year, but over the last 10 years. So we've prepared for this more challenging time. And the third building block is what we call management. And this is grounded in lean manufacturing. So a more efficient management that focuses on this lean journey, which started with Toyota in 2015. So Lincoln started with SAP on January 2015. And if you look at us, you'll see a very professional, dynamic, and well managed company. So these three building blocks, storage deficit, the correct strategy, and lean management, puts us on a completely different profitability level compared to what we've seen in the last negative cycles. I don't know if the video we have on screen is helping or getting in your way, but anyway, so we really wanted to speak very honestly with you. If you were here maybe on Kepler Day 2022, everyone would ask, well, what happens when the tide turns? I remember back then we had 30% EBITDA, and it felt like the sky was the limit. But what you were all asking was, well, what happens when the tide turns? Who will be swimming naked, as Warren Buffett says? So what we're showing here is the tide now has turned and we're not really swimming naked. So we were curious about running this stress test with the company at a more challenging time, and we were all blessed, so to speak, with this tougher period. So now that everything's well set, with the bread and butter well taken care of, how can we continue to strengthen and grow the company? We presented you a strategic plan back in 2013, and it included three greater universes. The first one, which is the storage market, we were certain that we had to strengthen leadership, and we will not let go of that leadership. So what we want is to strengthen our leadership position, and we have several different steps that we're taking along those lines. And second, we also realized that with our brand, our knowledge of the agribusiness, our connections and our clients, we can also expand our addressable market. That's our second strategy. And we'll bring you a few updates on that as well. Now, the third part of our strategy, the third building block, so to speak, and this is where XP comes in, is now that agribusiness is well connected with Procer, we have over 2,000 connected units, we can now derive value from that agribusiness connection. So we have this third strategy. It's a bit further away from our everyday work, so to speak, from our core business, but it's extraordinary in its transformative potential for the company. Now, I'll give you a quick update on this, and then my colleagues will dive a little bit deeper in each one of these strategies that we've devised. The first one, which is to strengthen leadership, well, we did a lot on this in 2025. So just to give you a few highlights, first of all, we've invested in customer service, in responding quickly to any issue that takes place in construction. So if you're not familiar with that, we're talking about a project-based company. We have over 270 projects underway, 270 construction projects. I don't know how many of you have remodeled your bathroom or your kitchen. If you have, you probably know that there are numerous issues with construction, delays and situations that pop up here and there. So we're always working to sort of mitigate these issues, but we're now poised to respond quickly and not let things snowball. We've had a 33% increase in efficiency when it comes to servicing those issues. Another interesting point is we've reinforced our commercial footprint and our communication with the market. That led to an increase by 30% in the volume of licensed businesses. So we have 1 billion reais in these types of business. A very strong footprint on business fairs, communication with customers, a very professional work by Jean and his team. Kepler is taking part in Agri show and rural shows, and you're all invited to that. We're present in about 30 different business fairs, and we love that. We have a full house all the time. Fatima said that. We had a concert at the end. Fatima sang with Bruna and her viola. So Kepler booths are always very exciting, and we really like being this close to customers. And maybe the last point when it comes to strengthening these initiatives, in 2025, we celebrated our 25th birthday. And, it's not everyone that can achieve that feat. So we ran a very effective communication strategy with our customers, and we involved our clients and associates doing what we call epic journeys. So they were interviewed to tell their stories, the stories of the future, the story of Coama, Fabiano's story about their associates and customers. And we even have a book now here. These videos, the videos of these stories generated 23 million views. So it's also a way to position our brand and to make ourselves present. Now, another strategy, which is to expand our addressable market, it's important to point out a few things, such as our operations in the Argentine market. We've had a strategic loss here, and Diego will give you more details about this strategy, but this is a market that's been opening up to us, and we've evolving our business. We had a leap from 3 to 17% in our international business in Argentina. It is now on the race with Paraguay to be one of our most significant export destinations. We talked about losses in seeds, and organically via our Celatron machine, we are growing 66% of sales of these machines in 2025. So we're a lot more focused on the seeds market, and there's a lot more we want to do there. We'll also talk about P&D. We've accelerated streamlining as much as we could, cutting costs. So we were able to accelerate our GDP to the point where in 2025, what we've launched in the last 5 years as an innovation metrics, that led our revenue from 3 to 11% in increase. So this is an innovation in our strategy, and Fabiano will talk a little bit more about that, but it also helped to expand our market. And last but not least is our connection strategy. We've been making good headway, and Felipe or Murilo actually will give you more details about that. And this is a lot like building a house. There's a lot of work that you have to do before you can actually raise the house. So you have to organize your data, you have the first touch points and the first meetings, and you sign with the main stakeholders in agribusiness. So we have our deal with XP that we'll be signing, and there's a lot more to come. We truly believe in this building block under our strategy, undergirding our strategy. Next, we'll have Fabiano talking a little bit more about our first strategy and how we've been strengthening our leadership. He'll dive a little bit deeper on that. Diego will talk about expanding our market, and Murilo will talk about this third strategy I mentioned. Well, I think this is it. We'll have time at the end to talk and go into more details, but the ultimate message here is Kepler is a phenomenal company with a 100-year history in agribusiness. It's a leader. It's a leader in this biggest business in the biggest business in Brazil. And Kepler has transformed itself in the last 10 years to weather the storm and come out of it fully dry. So we're doing really well. We are very clear on how we can derive value and continue to grow in this business. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to bring Fabiano to the stage to move on with the presentation. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. How are you? So let's talk a little bit about the first strategy, and it involves a lot of focus on research, development, and innovation. We know that staying at the top is not easy, so we need good services and products, and we've been working a lot on that. Clearly, we see four different pillars sort of guiding our development and innovation way. We're also working strongly on optimizing our labor force. One pain point for all of our clients currently is to attract and retain talent. So we've been working to have more autonomous equipment that rely less on human interaction. The second building block is increased capacity. And this goes back to what Bernardo was talking about. Our crops are larger and larger, and equipments are growing smaller. So equipment that used to weigh about 100 tons, now we're talking about 3 tons an hour capacity, which also guides our development. Also, power efficiency and thermal efficiency also play a great role in our development. We're also very focused on the security and safety of our equipment, thinking about who is operating those machines. We ended with 70% of our revenue invested in research and development. That's 50% more than we invested last year. Alongside that, the revenue coming from the new products we've launched over the last 5 years also played a role. We ended October with 63% in new products. And we're talking about everything we brought to the market in the last 5 years. And compared with the last period of last year, we're already 14 percentage points above what we had the previous year. When we looked over our strategy and had a sharper focus on our R&D to understand what our needs were, things took a turn. In 2020, we began to restructure our P&D department, reinforcing engagement in the process. So we moved from 7% of new products, and we're now at 11.5%. And by new products, I mean products Kepler did not produce before. We're not talking about improvements or new iterations of products we produced before. These are products Kepler did not manufacture before and which are now part of its portfolio. So it went from less than 1% to 11% in 5 years. During this time, we've been working on over 120 projects which we've already developed. And in the power efficiency and emissions reduction with our equipment, our products now reduce their emissions by 61,000 tons of CO2. So to have more products and faster products to our clients, we worked very intensely on technology to develop these new engineering products. The use of simulations allowed us to move from the average 2 to 2.5 years to launch every product to below 1.5 years today. And our goal is to bring that to closer to a year or even less, to have at least one new product a year. So these simulations that expedite our process allow us to have close to 3 simulations a day. Here we talk a little bit about our product manufacturing. This is a storage unit where most of our equipment is stored. We're talking about grinding, elevators, grain dryers, silo transporters. So this is what our units sort of look like and the things we've been focusing on. Together with all of that, just to update you on what we've done over the last few years, we had a new generation of the Celaton machines, which is what Bernardo showed before. Sales grew by 160% in the last 2 years. So this year, we brought to the market a new iteration. Alongside that, we have equipment such as our cleaning machines and our scraper, which is a piece of equipment that reduces the need for manpower, cleaning the machine and, clearing it from impurities in a manual way. There's also a new line of cleaning machines focused on a more efficient cleaning strategy. We also developed a new runner, which was an extracting machine. We co-created this with Coama, and this was developed precisely to meet one of our clients' demands, which was this. Grain genetics led it to have more and more oil, and that leads to rocks piling up at the bottom of the silo. So we co-created this alongside Coamo, and we were very successful at that. And recently, we've sold over 100 kits of this product to them. Alongside of that, with the CTF line, which is a uh, a machine that carries products at long distances. We have large equipment for ports and terminals. Our purpose was to service biofuel plants and ethanol plants. This is another novelty we brought this year. And for next year, we're already working on developing a new line for heat generators. These are biomass burners to work with the grain drying machines. And we also have what we call bio-K-Flow, which is a line of equipment that automatically feeds biomass into the dryer or the heat generator. So this is a little bit of what we've been working on. This is today's reality of most of our units in Brazil. Especially during a harvest season, we work with about 9 people. This is the average reality for any unit in Brazil. And with the equipment we've been putting in the market, with the technologies we have in terms of connectivity and automation, we can already have the possibility to work at the same unit with the same capacity run by only 2 people. That's a 78% reduction in manpower, so a significant decrease. And we continue to develop products with the purpose of having an autonomous unit, one where no one will have to touch so that it can continue to run. We will be able to control the entirety of the process remotely online. So now a little bit on what we've been doing to modernize our machines and to meet the demand, and how we've been looked at the entire process to produce good and sound equipment to our clients. We've also increased our line methodology. Bernardo also touched on that. This is something that really transformed the company. It was one of those transformative approaches. We've also been working on streamlining our processes. We have robot cells and automatic cuts so that we can produce more and better. That alongside a fine production programming using AI software that integrate engineering and the plants to have a more streamlined and easier, free-flowing production. We saw productivity grow by about 4% a year, which is a very good number for the industry.
These are simply some examples of what we have done to strengthen our pillar. Very well. I'd like to give the floor to Jean to speak about the addressable markets. Thank you. Well, good morning. Thank you, Fabiano. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for your presence. It's always wonderful to have a full house, to be in good company. And I'm going to share with you what we have been doing at the company. Well, Bernardo mentioned that we have an extensive pipeline, and during the year, we tend to focus on several projects to expand the addressable market and to allow for company growth. This is something we presented last year at our Kepler Weber Day, simply to remind you which is the way that we work aligned with a recurrent revenue. We work with the lease or rental of storage units, and we also uh, are able to accumulate quite a bit of capital thanks to this. We have focused significantly on this project. The structure is truly not very complex. We carry out a connection of a line of investors with our customers. We work on this so that we can capture a greater number of customers. Now, we showed you this last year, and we're working on the construction of this structure. We were going to create a fund to be able to finance these units. We did work with a fund. The fund has raised resources, and these resources are available. And we're working with this at length to take this model to the market and, of course, to offer a greater number of opportunities. Since last year, we have worked significantly. We have had more than 50 contacts. We have prepared over 30 proposals. We have held several in person meetings with our customers to show them this model, and this has elicited quite a bit of interest. Now, I think several customers truly believe in this model, in this new thesis. We still have not been able to sign a contract per se, but we truly believe in this new thesis. We have been learning a great deal through this thesis, and I think the market is getting more used to the idea. We have conversed with a large number of customers, and I'm going to mention the two main reasons that have hampered the advance of this process. First of all, we have the extremely steep interest rate, and then the fear of some of the customers of signing long-term customers. Now, we continue to believe in this thesis, and we do have a large number of projects that are underway and under discussion. The good news uh, is that everything we have discussed with the customers during the year has finally been transformed into sales. We have the 360 model, and we have been selling more of our normal equipment. The most recent sale was with São Martino, and in the end, São Martino was able to obtain the resources, and so this project has evolved. We are presently holding the initial meetings, and we're going to work with a storage for 240,000 tons. So we continue to support and believe this thesis, and we think that eventually this will be able to be sold in the market. Another project that we also brought to the market, we truly believe in this project and have devoted a great deal of energy to it. It refers to the reopening of the Argentine market. We have worked a great deal on this, and we begin to see the first results. And we do have a very strong presence in Argentina with important customers, more than 80. We have an excellent reputation through our brand in that country. What truly helps us in this, and that we believe is one of our competitive edges, our privileged location. The plant of Panambi, the Kepler plant, is only 200 kilometers away from the border, which means that it becomes easier and faster to get to Argentina than to reach Porto Alegre, which is the capital of the state where we are. And it's very positive, therefore, to be that close to the country, to Argentina. And the agricultural potential of Argentina is truly enormous. It's very similar to the production of Mato Grosso in Brazil, for example. This year, we have carried out a large number of activities that begin to show the results. We carried out several visits, as mentioned by Bernardo at the beginning. We are holding numerous marketing campaigns, and since 2025, we have been able to come up with a large number of customers. This has extended to 2025 with good results until 2024. From all the sales to the international market, Argentina represented 3%. Presently, it represents 17%. So we're focusing again on this. One of our priorities is to expand coverage. We're going to attempt to double the coverage the coming year. We're also participating a great deal in local fairs and well, our RS is another strategy that I believe could enable us to improve our results. Well, it seems my time is over. Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to Murilo to speak about our third building block or pillar with you. Thank you very much. What we would like to do here is to share with you the increase in our connectivity and post-harvest since Kepler Day 2024 up to present. If we want to generate value for the business, the first thing we have to do is to create connection. And we're sharing with you very significant achievements. We have more than 400 customers connected to our active customer base. We have 2,000 and some silos, which represents an increase of 25% in our connected capacity, looking back at 2024. So Kepler Weber truly is at the forefront of growth because of the benefits we offer our customers, the technology, the service rendering, and maintaining the quality of monitoring. We have 60 million tons on our platform in 2024, and at present we have 120 billion in terms of the value of connected grains. Now, in the Kepler Day last year, we also shared with you the main avenues for growth, and we continue with the main one, which focuses on the quality of grains. And of course, this is very important in the post-harvest. As part of grain quality, Bernardo spoke about the context of agribusiness, the amounts of grains produced that have undergone significant growth, the efficiency, automation of processes after the harvest. And in the previous slide, I spoke at length about storage. We have a management platform that allows for this connectivity and real-time follow-up in terms of our dryers. With this, we are able to offer a better quality for the grain that is stored, of course, a much greater efficiency and a significant reduction in risk. The second avenue that we have in this digital world, once again, leads me to underscore the importance Here we have the management of our units. We can connect any device in real time to our platform. When it comes to automation, we have a roadmap to reach 2030 with completely autonomous units. And some of this equipment is already among our customers. It helps us to reduce the variations in standards. And with a system like this one, well, without automation, a system on average will require 5 professionals. With this system, we work with only 2 people, and this enables us to work with greater efficiency, of course, a more significant control. All of this because of what automation offers the market. I'm going to speak about our 4 new routes for development that we are working with. I will begin with the first two. In October of last year, we set forth this challenge. We started up the project, and in Sao Paulo, we recurrently visited the customers that are involved with agribusiness to speak about this benefit in terms of after harvest, comparing ourselves to companies that also work in this field. We began to work with the main customers in the market, those involved in trading, logistics, industries that consume grains. And there was a great deal of discovery of opportunities, values, technologies. Many of these customers were highly interested. We have signed some deals, and this construction began in October of last year. We went with experimenting, and this process extended until October of this year, where we began our negotiation with the companies. Of course, we have high expectations. We can already share with you some of the contracts that we have signed. Now, during this journey of experimenting and of construction, we believe that this new thesis will become a very significant part of our pillar going forward when it comes to differentiation in the post harvest. Now, the last part, in my opinion, is of course the most interesting, besides being here at XP. 2 avenues that we have defined as being very important: the banks and the insurance companies. From among the contacts that we had last year, we already have connectivity with XP. We have a very close connection with Fatima. We presented our strategy, and of course, this connection became much stronger in terms of our goals. With XP, we have begun to work with an alignment of goals. We present our portfolio, and we see that the customers are quite open to receiving these digital services. And of course, there are enhancements in the financial part as well. And with the insurance companies, we are also working with XP. We have several customers. Uh, we've spoken to our customers. There's a significant scale up in this solution, and we have an intense roadmap to present all of this to our customers in the roadshow this year, along with XP. We disseminated all of this in the market, and XP also wants to work with us in terms of insurance, and we're working with the main insurance companies active in Brazil. We're at the very final stages of this technical construction of an insurance product for the grains. And very soon, once we are able to overcome that hurdle of red tape and much more, we think we will be able to share with you another novel news, something that we will offer to our consumers: digital insurance in real time. So, this is one of the significant discoveries we have. It is under construction, and This will offer us a potential of creating new revenue streams for our company as well as for our customers that will become more connected. With this, I would like to thank you very much for the opportunity. We're going to now go on to our Agro 360 degrees panel, and we're going to have several speakers. Our commercial director, Renato Arroyo, will be the mediator. We're going to have discussions in terms of agribusiness. Very well, you can take your seats. We're somewhat late regarding our agenda. I call Julia Rios from Morgan Stanley. If you could please take your seat next to Jean. Well, we're all involved in the process of planning for 2026. Everybody is in a hurry. It is time to, of course, close your results for the year. So, very well. I'm going to ask Sean to begin with the first question. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for your presence and for uh, bringing your thoughts to Kepler Day. We're attempting to unveil an important topic here. Well, we began with Bernardo, and I will first of all ask each of you to introduce yourselves and speak about your position, your role. Thank you all. A good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation. I work at São Martino. São Martino is a company that produces ethanol. We produce 2.5 tons of sugarcane, and we now have a project that is going to grow to 10 million tons equivalent to corn and increase the amount fivefold. We're going to begin to operate in a year approximately, and well, São Martino today has revenues of approximately 8 billion BRLs, and we have some very large projects for corn, and we're going to be investing approximately 200 million reais.
So, scenario wise, we just wanted to share with you some of the challenges. The scenario for sugar and ethanol has been quite challenging, mostly because of sugar prices. Bernardo talked about soybean prices, and it's no different with sugar. Uh, Prices have dropped significantly and is now recovering, but it is still below the production price for most players. Now, with corn based ethanol, the scenario is a bit different. Because the technology to change or to turn corn into ethanol has been evolving a lot more, and that combined with greater availability of corn in the area because of second crop corn, you have a great abundance of product across the industry, which is led by Impaz, FS, Cerradinho. Trestentos is beginning to produce it now. San Martino began last year. So there's huge investment in corn-based ethanol, which comes with a lot more storage demand. And because the window for second crop corn is very narrow, it's very important to increase storage as much as we can so that you can purchase corn at a more adequate price. And 80% of corn-based ethanol cost is corn itself. So it's a critical supply, and we're now along the course of investing on that. Now, starting or actually concluding stage two, we're talking about San Martino having about 50% more corn storage. If you look at Copasa, there's about 70%. So there's still some room to grow in this industry. And that will depend a little bit on the interest rate scenario, which has a huge impact on the project. We could even increase that percentage even more, depending on how things go. Thank you, Felipe. Antonio, what can you share with us along those same lines? Good morning. Thank you, and congratulations to Kepler's team. This is a really amazing event. Well, my name is Antonio Guerrero. I've been in agribusiness for 24 years, near half of that in the United States and the other half here in Brazil. And for 3 months or 3 weeks, I've been transitioning. I was president and commercial or sales leader for Latin America, Mexico, and South America, including Argentina, where I see great potential, as well as Paraguay. And for those who don't know my accent, this was not mentioned, but I come from this small but huge country at the same time, which is Paraguay. Have you all enjoyed your breakfast? Very well. So there are basic things we need to understand. When you drink your coffee, you have to understand there are thousands of farmers behind that. And this is something nobody failed to eat or drink today. So they need to feed themselves. And as the population increases, and fortunately, these people's income has continued to increase as well, everyone wants high quality product. And one reality is the fact that the world cannot feed itself without Brazil or without Latin America. The privilege that we enjoy of having a barbecue at weekend or eat amazing fruit is our reality, and it is a privilege we don't even realize we have because we were born in this blessed country, which is Brazil. Or Latin America. So this is a business where demand is guaranteed. We have a world that's growing and wants to eat more and better. So in this journey that we are on, we are truly in a blessed country in terms of the climate situation, investors, farmers, and as Bernardo said, if we look at the world's history, there's not been any other country where management was so positive or impactful as Brazil's across a single generation. Brazil's change from a food importing country in our lifetime to a net exporter of food is really formidable. This is something no other country in the world has experienced. And best of all, we're only just beginning. Now, that's the positive side of that story. We are at the right place at the right time with the right team. So with the agriculture that we have and farmers facing so many challenges, which we all face every day, myself included, and even so, with the dynamism in results that Bernardo showed, you see production is increasingly greater and more efficient, and management is more and more effective with production requiring more and more storage. So these cycles that Bernardo showed have occurred in the past and they will occur in the future. They're historic. And just as we're sure that companies like Kepler will supply their own farmers, they will be increasingly better in their management, not only to ride the wave that we have right now, but also to strengthen their operations for downside periods. So these opportunities that these cycles bring may actually provide opportunities to make sure that we're working the right way, investing the right way, not only to surf the positive waves, such as the one we've had so far, but also to experience what we're starting to see right now with good financial results. So you are now poised to be in a much better position so that when the tidal wave comes again, because it will, given the natural cycle that we're in, you'll also be doing really well. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Kepler, for having me, and Bernardo for inviting me. I am the CEO of Tres Tentos. I'm actually the founder of the company, which is a 30-year-old company. And we work on an ecosystem that goes from feedstock sales to originating grain and industrializing grain, soybean, most importantly. So we have three soybean crushing and production of soybean bran and biodiesel. And now, as mentioned, we're also processing corn and producing ethanol. Across this journey, I was just speaking to Bernardo about this. Kepler plays a very important role, just as Tres Tempos, which started 30 years ago. Our origin, which is in Santa Barbara do Sul, which is right beside Panambi, only 30 kilometers away. So Kepler is a part of Tres Tempos' history. We currently have 2.5 million tons of capacity. So whether we're talking about dryers or transportation or silos, we really believe in this business. This is one of the brands that crisscross the country with farmers left and right. And this is a very resilient business. On the topic of the scenario, as it was said, this really is our reality. We are facing challenging times. We are seeing, as you showed, the airplane with 3 engines in flames. So we're seeing little leverage and low profitability, which stresses the market and really limits our possibilities. But as we discussed, we live in cycles. This is not the first time we've lived through this, and certainly won't be the last. So, as Bernardo said, we have the years of abundance and the years of scarcity. And this is true to everyone's lives, and it is certainly true in agribusiness, which is what we're living now. So I believe that this is a moment to make adjustments, to seek efficiency, and to see some natural selection so that the good ones stay on and really weather this more challenging time. And I truly believe that companies who manage to do that, we see that Kepler is definitely one of that, and we are certainly seeking the same efficiency. But the companies that manage to weather this time will come out stronger and will continue to grow with the agribusiness. Brazil's calling in the agribusiness is undisputable. It's indisputable the strength that we have in a country that continues to grow its production. And this is something that's absolutely sustainable. There's a lot of discussion over that, but this is something that we need to stand for. Brazil has 2/3 of its land with its natural vegetation preserved. So we have only about 10% of Brazil's territory being occupied by agriculture. So we are the powerhouse that we have with 2 crops a year, and in productivity that's growing with the increase of with the improvement of technology. So we're absolutely optimistic. And once again, Kepler, congratulations on the work that you've been doing with Brazilian agriculture. Thank you, João. Julia? Hi, I'm Julia Rizzo with Morgan Stanley. And I just wanted to share a little bit about this cautiously optimistic perspective. Naturally, our colleagues here are a lot more experienced than I am, but thinking from a more global perspective, which I'm privileged enough to have because of my work at the bank, we are still facing a very challenging time, but the results for Brazilian agriculture, when you compare that with other places in the world, is still very important. When you compare to other companies such as CNH or John Deere, and look at sales in the United States or North America at large, we're seeing decreases by sort of 20, 30%. And sales are also falling in Brazil or South America as well. But the there was really a scare. The lack of credit and liquidity is adding challenges. And the cautiously optimistic perspective I would like to add has a little bit of that. So perhaps in the short term, we might struggle a little bit. It's still a challenging scenario. The crop that was planted at a higher cost or higher interest rates is the one that's now on the ground. We are still to see the results of that in 2031. And 2026 will still be a challenging time. I agree with Bernardo on that. But I'm optimistic because when we see Brazil in a situation such as this one, just as the United States, with sales falling by 30%, and the global balance for soybean at the world, the surplus we're seeing comes from years of overproduction and high consumption with high net inventories and low prices. It's a lot likely that that will turn into a deficit this year, or at least a very small or very narrow surplus. And because population is growing, and as you said, people like to eat and eat better, demand will continue to grow, which will produce an adjustment. And once the market realizes, when the world, and the Chinese most importantly, realize that Brazilian farmers need to become liquid, and I'm very optimistic that we're close to the bottom of the commodity cycle, the higher perspective should improve. And we also expect interest rates to begin to fall next year in the United States, just as in Brazil. That's another upside for commodities. So this is a cautiously optimistic perspective I have on the industry. Thank you. One thing we hear a lot when we visit our clients, Felipe and João, that the investment we make is regardless of what's happening. Sometimes you will make an investment and you're in a bad scenario, but that will pay off both during that scenario and when a good scenario comes as well. And we saw that with the strong industrialization of agribusiness. 2 or 3 years ago, we were talking about 25 ethanol units, as Felipe or Marcelo talked about. Then it went to 45. We're now talking about 60. And during the presentation, we looked a lot at diversification. How can we seek new products or new income sources? So we talked about industrialization. What can we expect moving forward, both in terms of diversification and new sources of income? Unlike with things work with soybean, with sugarcane, you always need an integrated process. So you need a lot of your crops, or 80% of that is based on cost, and then you need the industry to process that into sugar and ethanol. So from the industrialization perspective, that's what what history looks like. About 50 to 70% is growing sugarcane, and then you process that. In recent years, we've had new products. So yeast that comes from the ethanol production, or biomethane that comes from biodigesting vinasse. It's an agricultural product that you process into a different industrial product. And then we work with corn ethanol. So they grew corn and changed it into, or transformed it into ethanol. We didn't have corn before, but we had the expertise in processing and selling ethanol. So alongside corn, we had a new product which is the greater differentiator, and that's DDG. Because if you look at the cost of producing corn based ethanol without DDG, and you have to remember that this didn't exist before. Now, when you combine the revenue from DDG and deduct that from the initial cost, then that goes from 13 or 4 to 13 or 14, depending on the area. So DDG is a very pleasant surprise. This is a protein that's well accepted by herds everywhere, most importantly. And unlike soybean bran, DDG adds protein and calories as well. So what you notice in many areas is that this is being well accepted. And this created a new market. We're already developing the market in the states of Goiás and Minas Gerais. And we've been very positively surprised with how this product is doing. So we're moving a little bit more to the protein market via the production of ethanol, which is where we have our expertise. Perfect. What I would add to what Felipe said in terms of diversification, Brazil does great work in soybean nowadays, which is our main focus, our main product. We also have corn, where we saw great development, especially with the advent of second crops. But there's also room in different crops here in Brazil. Even as a characteristic of our company, we've been trying to foster other types of feedstock which are also a good fit. Two of which we could highlight as very interesting from the farmer's perspective. And also the industry's perspective. I believe that this is something San Martin is also looking into or investing in. This comes alongside corn. It has a great fit for farmers. This is something that complements the window that you have with the second crop with a later planting. And it adds the possibility to have an even more significant second crop. And in the case of biodiesel, we're also investing significantly in canola. This is something we're doing in the winter. The acreage has grown and will grow even more. And I've been always said that this is something that's rarely being seen. And this is a very important product in the chain. It produces twice as much oil as soybean per ton, which is very positive.
Well, when it comes to diversification, that combination of biodiesel, ethanol, and biodiesel, we have co-products such as DDG and soybean. All of these make the country have that edge in terms of animal protein. Now, we do have that platform that will successively take Brazil to becoming one of the great vectors in the growth of Brazil and, of course, enhance the growth of the country as a whole. Now, if we put together everything you have said, we see that all of this is quite regional. If you look at Rio Grande do Sul, you have ethanol, biodiesel, canola as well. Now, there are environments with wheat. In the north, we have maize or corn, which means we have a multitude of options to be able to further create. When we focused on storage, we observed that corn perhaps is what most demands storage as a whole. And well, it's that mouth of the crocodile that we saw on the graph. Now, what can we expect today? We produce 40 million tons with a consumption that is practically guaranteed. Now, we can perhaps further develop this demand. And what is it that we can expect in terms of corn going forward? That's an excellent question. It's important to remember that despite the successful growth that Brazil has had in the last few years. Tropical agriculture is still at its early stages. Now, when we think about large size agricultural equipment, uh, in Argentina, we have had longer use of this. Brazil is still undergoing development. The technologies for production in tropical agriculture, for example, although we have had significant advance in the last decade, they're still at their incipient stages. They will reach significant growth, of course. Now, the world needs to decarbonize. This is, of course, steadily under discussion. It's not that we have an option, it's something that we need to do. And the world also needs Latin America for this decarbonization process. It makes sense. So the world is beginning to discover that agriculture once again will be that industry that will save the world once again through the process of decarbonization. Now, the industry for the production of ethanol or biodiesel once again is happening in Brazil or around every corner in Brazil. Now, if we think of John Deere, for example, they're also launching solutions in terms of ethanol, the production of corn, the production of soybean, the production of sugarcane. All of the crops in Brazil are using diesel. And before we know it, we will have ethanol solutions as well. Other companies in agricultural machines are investing locally in Brazil in equipment that will use biodiesel and ethanol. Now, the global demand for these solutions will simply arise automatically because of the industry itself, because of the type of machinery we're using. We're going to have a very positive circular economy. The growth of corn in Brazil will doubtlessly continue to be something exponential. We have a gap, of course, which are pasture lands. We also have the problem of storage. And what agribusiness is signaling to us is that we need to go into further detail in terms of this. In the United States, most of the storage is found in the farms themselves. Now, this trend to increase storage on the farms themselves will continue. It will increase once again to be able to enhance the security within the farm and for the farmer. Now, these are events that will happen, of course, despite the challenges. I'm 100% optimistic, and the agricultural production of Brazil is truly something singular, very unique, and the world is just awakening to that incredible potential that Brazil has. Uh, Julian, uh, in that context of corn and within the topic of storage and consumption, once again, what is your view of this for the coming months, the coming years? The phenomena of corn, well, it's not recent. It has uh, been happening in the last few years, but it seems to have increased the pace. Now we have the competitiveness of ethanol, and this industry, of course, will have to continue. And internal demand, of course, is truly thriving. When we speak about storage, perhaps you won't appreciate what I have said, but before the ethanol In Brazil, we thought that investments in storage would never reach 100% as in developed countries. Now, the ethanol industry brings about that need for storage, perhaps during only 60 days a year. Formerly, we had soybean, then we had corn. You would empty out your silos, and everything was very organized. Now, the question nowadays is where are you going to store the soybeans? Now, this entire process becomes even more interesting than the demand per se, both domestically and in the global markets. Well, I believe that the topic of corn, as we're discussing it, also brings about another important issue. And of course, we're favoring our product, we're favoring Kepler Weber here. Storage on the farm, as Antonio recently remarked, to bring storage to the farm itself, which is the repercussion of this within the industries. We know that most of the investments, uh, heavy investments, the industry is having to make is for storage to be able to withstand the process of the entire year. Now, to have a well-structured storage within the farm, would this have an impact on increase in investment? João Felipe, would it be easier to have raw material available? No. Well, the problem of storage, it's not a choice. You have to have it. You have open storage, harvest after harvest. We see this as a recurrent image. Now, storage on the properties per se will have to necessarily grow going forward. This represents a logistic gain, and at the moment of the harvest, it will do away with all of that pressure. So, storage, of course, is extremely welcome, but as you mentioned, the grower will fill it up with corn, then will fill it up with soybean, and the storage in the ethanol industry is absolutely necessary with at least 50% of the capacity for half of the year when you make that change in the properties from corn to soybean. And to store everything on the property, of course, will have to become part of the accounts going forward. Now, if we had more storage, it would be better to purchase corn at a lower cost. Now, the experience that I had with Kepler with this project, I think it is worthwhile sharing that with you. When we began to discuss the project, the budget, of course, was much higher than it ended up being at the end. And as a team working in partnership with you, we were able to create an entire process. We were able to accommodate what it was that the engineers wanted. We had a large number of meetings. We would look at the return, and Kepler was a partner. They helped us in the construction of our silos. And that partnership with XP to be able to work, of course, with the financing of this warehouse, this storage unit, we ended up analyzing all of this, and Well, there's the cost of opportunity. We tried to see if this would be below the CDI. All of this did not make sense for us, but for an average size grower, I think that this entire process would be extremely feasible. In the in practice, the farmer, those who build storage on their farms, they won't have the risk of the construction of the silo. Somebody will finance that for them, and they can work with a mill in the region, something that is nearby. So you have to find a partner, build a low cost and efficient solution, and you can continue forward with a great deal of confidence in this project. Now, your team was also highly professional during the entire process of development. I would like to ask you each to make your closing remarks. Antonio, your closing remarks before we end this panel. Well, thank you very much. Well, all of the changes that we see happening in Brazil are extremely relevant and they're significant, not only when it comes to the production of soybean and corn and what we are used to doing. Perhaps we don't all have a deep understanding of what should happen, is to have our barbecue at the end of the week, of course, with a bit of beer, and all of these people are also farmers. Now, for a large meat producer, what is happening at present is a scarcity of meat. And how is the world going to be fed with meat? It will have to come from Brazil. So it's not only the growth of corn that will come because of the global decarbonization. It is the Brazilian protein industry that will continue to grow in a significant way in the coming decades, and that internal consumption that will happen and is already happening in Brazil will require storage. We need to store corn to later feed the livestock or poultry. This is what we feed ourselves with every week, and everybody needs soybean as well. And this creates a need, the need to have storage, as we didn't have this production cycle because we would put the herds on pasture land. You had thousands of hectares open. This is no longer possible. Millions of hectares of pasture land are being transformed into corn and soybean. And now the meat industry is beginning to feel this transformation. And this transformation will lead to an increased demand in storage, of course, throughout Brazil, besides the storage required for the production of ethanol and corn ethanol. So, my message is that tropical agriculture doesn't exist. It only exists in Brazil. We're the very first to do this. We're still at a very incipient stage. If we have done what we have done in this short period of time, you can simply imagine what will happen with all of the companies that will continue to invest. John Deere, for example, has two research and development centers that are global, one in the United States, the other in Germany. We have, well, we're a long-standing company. We're 185 years old. Last year, we invested $30 million to create the first research and development center for tropical agriculture here in Brazil. Well, as John Deere, other companies are also making their investments in Brazil. Now, Brazilian agriculture will continue to be transformed at a vertiginous speed, and the grower at present is absorbing technology because they know that this is of prime importance. Agriculture in Europe simply exists because of subsidies. There is no efficiency there. It's impossible to produce with efficiency in Europe. And in the United States, there is also the government support. In Brazil, the growers that you know have gone through a natural filter in these last few years. They're good and they're truly good. They've grown without subsidies, without that safety network. So we're faced with an extremely thriving sector facing the most incredible challenges in the last 40 years in Brazil. And despite all of this, we have attained the position that you are aware of. They're now investing in technology, in research, all focused on tropical agriculture. And this is not the end for Brazil. Brazil is going to go far beyond that. And Brazil is truly brilliant in terms of this. I fully agree with Antonio and all the rest. Well, it's a vision, of course, that requires a great deal of caution, perhaps in the short term, because of the present day situation, and that will extend to 2026 or 2027, perhaps. Now, the situation is not the best, but Brazil truly is the country that will focus on food production going forward for the entire world. This is only the beginning of that entire journey that we can foresee going forward. And it's fundamental that companies like Kepler and all of our industries continue to believe, because the future, I think, will unveil very positive things. Those priority agendas, food safety and energy security, are agendas where Brazil will end up being a leader and play a extremely significant role. I would like to thank all of our panel members. I don't think I need to add anything. They are the experts in this field, and they have given us a very appropriate vision of the moment, of the scenario. We had Julia and Joe speaking about looking only at the biofuel market, but not looking at the food market. But I think they come hand in hand. It's impossible to separate them. Our strength in that and that role that we are playing in that. Thank you all so much for your comments and for your participation. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you again, Julia, Antonio, João Marcelo, and also Felipe, who had to leave a little bit earlier. Well, in the meantime, while our organizers put the stage together, we will talk a little bit about numbers. Every strategy, every initiative that was mentioned, how does that translate into figures, into results? To address all of that, I'd like to invite onto the stage our CFO, Renato Arroyo. Please, Renato. Good morning, everyone. First of all, it's a pleasure to have you all here in our fourth Investor Day. I think it's of utmost importance to have all of you here, and investors, analysts, and also our management board. Now, because we're a little bit behind on the time, Bernardo mentioned Thanksgiving, because we're here next to the JK Avenue, I think we'll have to do this in only a few minutes, moving a bit faster. So, talking a little bit about the indicators and trying to translate what was said in terms of our strategy and how the company has managed to be resilient at this more challenging time in the market. Bernardo used the plane with four engines where only one of them is working. I think it's very important for a diversified company such as Kepler to have, via its segmented business, a more resilient business. So I think it's important to mention here the replacement and services department in the company has been growing at a 9.6% CAGR. This is the result of significant growth on our storage business side. We went from 70 million to 370 million tons in 25 to 30 years. This is extremely important and will require a lot of replacement in replenishment service in the next few years. Another thing that was mentioned by our colleagues is the company's international business. We're looking at 7% of a growing business. In 2023, we had 111 million in revenue from our international business. So we've been looking at the last 12 months, and it's important to mention the significance of the work we've been doing in Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay, and the exponential growth we've had in Argentina more specifically. In ports and terminals, there's also been substantial growth in our margins, especially in 2025. Our revenue sort of walked sideways, but there's a lot on the pipeline that we've been doing in terms of work. Farms and agribusiness is still the core business for us, but we've also been diversifying, reducing the representativeness of these businesses, seeing as our other businesses are growing a little bit more. And there's also been a slightly decrease in margins versus the last year because, or as a result of what we've presented here. There's a challenge on credit. Credit is a little bit more expensive. There's less credit on the market, and also commodity prices has decreased by close to 14% in the last 3 years. So we had interest rates that went up 45%. And if we think about the prospects we had last year, we were expecting 25%. We're at 15%. And the lack of credit has also had an impact on our farms and agribusiness. And one positive point here is how the company has operated on different verticals to diversify and also operate in different businesses that are also important to the company. Another thing, when we look at 2022, you see that we had 76% of our business focused on agribusiness and farms. As you can see, the share of agribusiness and farms has decreased and growing in replenishment and services. We had 12% in that. We're now with 20% in replenishment and services. In international business, we had 9% and we now have 14%. So the company has been diversifying, and it's worth noting and ratifying what Bernardo said. We began to invest in distribution centers in 2017 with 1. We now have 9. So this is another very important avenue for growth for us. Margin-wise, we see a 4% decrease comparing 2025 with 2024. We've reported larger volumes than the year before. We have orders, we have a large demand. We should have a very substantial, very healthy portfolio, possibly bigger than last year, but there's also significant price pressure. So we're seeing a 4 percentage point decrease from that. So the margin's very close to the one we had in 2021, but it's still a very healthy margin considering the macroeconomic situation we're currently in. When it comes to EBITDA and the EBITDA margin, this is something Bernardo touched on. We are at 15.9, 4 percentage points less than the year before. And we see that within the cycles that we experience in this business, had we not taken steps in terms of diversification and operational improvement and expense control within the company, which we had in the last few years, we probably would be at a very similar situation to what we experienced in 2016. So, this entire framework that we created provides a lot of sustainability for us to remain resilient during this time. In net revenue or in net margins, we delivered a Q3 with 12.2. We now have 9.1 in the last 12 months. We see a slight decrease between 23 and 24, much because of the R in 2024 and a 3 percentage points between 24 and 25 following from operational impacts. The company's ROIC, 21% over the last 12 months. This is a much higher or an ROIC that's outpaced the market very significantly. We understand that our ROIC should remain between 20 and 30% over the course of the next cycle. It should now stabilize. We've had slightly more challenging 4 quarters. Profitability began to dip starting in the fourth quarter of 2024, and we expect this to level off. As Bernardo said, 2026 will be very similar to 2025. We should face many of the same challenges, but we understand that when it comes to the ROIC, there's been some stabilization, seeing as we've had a very high capex cycle in the last 2 years. Looking at our dividends history, this is something that we are very proud of. The company's payout has been growing. We went from 18% in 2019 to 104% in the first 9 months of 2025. Last week, the company also established that it would pay out another 5 million. So, adding that to the 95 that we've already reported, this year the company has already paid 120 million reais in dividends. So it's a much more significant payout than what we've had in previous years, which is very significant, bearing in mind the taxes that were sanctioned last night. So this is something the company has kept in mind as well. Net cash at a time of high interest rate, we have companies that are under a lot more stress, paying 18 to 19% interest, which has weighed heavily on the company's balance sheet. So we now see that we have net cash flow, even paying high interest rates. We have a debt time frame of 2.8 years. That's the debt duration. We have something a little more focused next year, but we also have short-term that we can renew. So we're doing very well from the balance sheet standpoint. Looking at the company's capex, this is a slide I really like. Usually at times of struggle or of slightly more significant challenges, companies step on the brake and delay their growth. Initiatives that would provide more profitability and add business cases that would be important for the future. But Kepler is in a position where it can continue to do what it has and continue to invest as needed. We've invested in new products. Fabiano showed 57% of our income comes from products that were either iterated or launched in the last few years. We've also invested a lot on developing our IT vertical. Bernardo mentioned that on January 5th, we adopted SAP, and now on January 2026, we will shift to SAP for HANA. So in 11 years, we've changed a lot, investing a lot in technology, information technology and AI, and also growing and modernizing our plants. We've invested a substantial amount at our offices at Panambi. If you've been there before, you looked at how dynamic things are and all the improvements we're making, which will create a significant revenue stream for us. So a lot of investments have been made. On Q3, we began to slow down a little bit when it comes to investment. We've had several months or several quarters where our capex growth, but the important thing is we've made the necessary investments that will bring a lot of positive returns for the company in the future. That being said, I'll now turn over again to Luis, and our executives can also stay around. Thank you so much. Thank you, Renato. Renato can also stay on the stage. We will now have this interactive time where those of you here in person at the XP auditorium and also those who are connected online can submit their questions. I will be here mediating this part of the panel. Fabiano, Murilo, Diego can all already come, and I'll sit here on the first chair to make things easier. Our organizers are very fast here with the chairs. We have everything in place already. All right, so let's do this. This is a time for everyone here to ask their questions and clear their doubts with our partners. I already have a few questions from those who are online, but those who are here in person, those who made the effort to join us in person, will be the priority. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, say what your name is and what company you represent. Hi, everyone. Dramazini from Citi. Thank you so much for this event. Breakfast was great. Now, on new products, you added a very interesting slide with your products for 25 and 26. We have KW Max that's been remodeled. Also, a new grain transporter, which is something that's sort of new to you. On electricity, which is something that's even newer, what can we expect from now on? I know that you are on a post-season period, but do you expect to have sort of a price differentiation between your conventional silos and your bag silos? Should we expect something like that moving forward? And second, on the dividends issue, the company has a very comfortable balance sheet. Your net cash was, I think, 27 million this year, but we also see several peers in other industries with mega payouts. Yes, we've been growing and developing substantially over the past few years, especially when it comes to power efficiency. For next year, our engineering team is already working on biomass burning. This is one of the most important products we've brought to the market, but we'll continue to work on power efficiency. We're also looking into biomethane and also using gas as sources of energy for our operations. So what we can expect are increasingly more advanced products, and especially on the power efficiency side. Andre, thank you so much for the question. I think this is one that was already expected. And I think that one important point is if we look at the company's last 4 years, we've had about 70 to 75% in payouts. We started that routine 4 years ago, distributing 45%, which has been going up and up. We are now at 104% at the first 9 months of 2025. Another 5 million have already been sanctioned to be paid in the next 20 days. What was sanctioned yesterday was widely expected. It was something that we had been discussing internally for some time, but we will also discuss and we'll see if more will be deliberated for the company. But first, we assess whether the company has the capacity or can bank the payouts of more funds. But we also have to look at the business in a higher level, so to speak. We have to look into our debt cycle. which should be more challenging next year, but we should have more assessments in the next few days. A question from Werner at the front. Hi, congratulations on the event. Werner Roger with Tribo Capital. I'm very proud to be your greatest shareholder, not the company, but the quota holders for the company. We're very proud of that. And also with Tres Tentos, we're one of the greatest investors. I just wanted to say something before I ask my question. I'm an agricultural engineer. I was in college in August 77, and we had professors saying two things. If you're studying agronomy to be a farmer, you should take the test again and go study medicine, because you won't become a farmer by studying agronomy. But we see that they were wrong. The second professor, as Julia said, very rightly, he said the difference between developed and underdeveloped, which is the word they used back then, is that developed countries have 100% of their crops in storage, but not the underdeveloped countries. So that's the situation. We have a deficit of static storage, and that's a huge bottleneck. So my question is, if we come to a collapse, because we're on the verge of collapse, how will we address that situation? That could be via banks, via government bailout, or other economic stakeholders, so that we do not really collapse, because we have our corn crops hurting from the rain. And of course, we have the bags that sort of contain the situation, but it's not a final solution. So what can we do? And I don't mean just Kepler, but what can the country do about this near collapse situation that we're seeing today, which will affect not only farmers, but the entire production chain? It will affect even banks, the financiers, the government. So what to do when we're on the verge of a collapse in terms of food security? I don't know if anyone has anything to add, but please feel free to do so if you wish. I think there are a few things we need to say. First of all, we need to put things into perspective. When we compare 2025 and 2019, where we were before the pandemic, soybean prices had similar margins. Prices were a little bit better. Interest rates were as low as 4.5%. And now, when we look at Kepler and we look at the market, we're processing twice as much as we were in 2019. So it's twice the dryers, twice the silos, twice the figures, twice the EBITDA, comparing, 2019 and 2025. So I think that agribusiness has woken up to storage and is doing the necessary investments. So even at this extremely difficult year, when it comes to interest rate margins, agribusiness is still prioritizing storage. And we see, other companies here doing that. And the entire production chain is prioritizing storage and is investing accordingly. So I do not see any silver bullet. It would be great for something to come from the government, but I don't think that's on the pipeline. But I also see a hope that this pain point that is logistic inefficiency to drive the prioritization of investments on storage. Of course, I expect things to improve. I believe that the cycle will turn at the end of 26, but we should have another growth wave. But I do believe in this structural improvement a lot more than I would in a sort of silver bullet coming from the government, for example. And it's important that you mentioned this type of silo, the bag silo, but our opinion changed a little bit to think, well, this is a necessary evil. And my analogy is when you have a fever. When that happens, you take a medication, but if that continues for 5 to 10 days, you go to the doctor. And it's the same thing with this bag silo. You re- you turn to that in times of overproduction, but nobody wants to keep those silos full for a long time because there's risks to quality. So I think that the more important thing is that we need less people and more automation to have more people on the field. And of course, we also begin to sell back silos. But we'll not be selling that. We want a relationship with those patients who are taking anti-fever medicine. So we are making new connections, meeting new potential clients who in 2 to 3 years will be clients within this structure.
Any further questions? And I do remind you that we have people online, and of course, they're following up on this presentation. We still will prefer those who have come in person to join us at this event. Very well. Let's go on to the first question. Rodrigo Smith Prado, thank you for your attendance and for following up on our event. Congratulations for the event. W- Well, the maintenance and spare parts, can they be adapted to your storage units because of the growth that you've been having? And it has been a very quick growth. Rodrigo, it's almost not a question, it's a statement of what is happening. We had 120 people here and 130 people following our event online. Now, without a doubt, this was a very uh, positive strategy, and we're also working at the centers of labor development, offering training to the operators that work with us in this system. It's a way of enhancing the relationship, and they have 300 million here in RS. Of course, our final goal is to reach that billion BRLs. We are not going to project when. We have increased the pace for two significant reasons. First of all, uh, repairs and services has a very good margin. But the other half of the story, of course, is the strategy that we have. If you see a distribution center in the middle of Maranhão or Paragominas or Mato Grosso, the clients in that region have to decide if they're going to use Kepler Weber or a competitor, always based on that. It's like choosing between Toyota and Mitsubishi. You will find the distributor that is closer to you and not 130 kilometers away. We need to have that expeditious replenishment of your spare parts. So this is very strategic. Now, Kepler Weber has a premium price. But what is more important, perhaps, is the service that we offer. And I think our strategy has been a very positive one. We truly believe in repair and service, replenishment and service. And to answer the second question, that refers to the use of our repair and service for other peers, for other companies. We have the great privilege of having 10,000 units of Kepler Weber throughout Brazil, differently from most of our competitors that don't have the critical mass to have this network set up. And yes, in some spare parts, they are interchangeable. Well, the ducts where the grains go through, for example, that of course is a fully interchangeable piece. Now, simply to add to this. Now, why do we believe so much in our replenishment and service unit? When we refer to 2019 in Kepler, we used to sell in volume half of what we're selling presently. And what we are selling at present, I think, uh, refers more to the past compared to what you are selling on the farm at present. If you have a pipeline that continues to grow year after year through this exponential growth as we have had at Kepler, of course, this will create a greater need for replenishment in the future. More people will need replenishment and service. And that is why it is a business unit that is, of course, very interesting. It has the highest gross margin. And as you increase revenues, you have a better dilution of your fixed costs and SG&A as a whole. So you have a gross margin, which is the highest in the company, and your EBITDA margin will increase uh, substantially. Simply to expand on the strategy for RS, we're using technologies ever more to ensure that the farmers will not have any problem. We're using our connectivity resources once again to generate demand for replenishment and service. But what is positive is for the client to have the unit operating when it is necessary. So these are the additional pillars that we are working with to strengthen our relationship. Another question here. Well, all of this is thanks to a good harvest. This is a question from Werner. I would like to comment on what is happening in Argentina, our brothers in Paraguay, Uruguay. Now, Argentina hasn't made any changes for quite some time. They are now faced with the need of having to recondition their silos. So, this will mean that they will need services from replenishment and services. Now, in Latin America, we have leadership. We're trying to further strengthen that leadership. In other markets, we work more based on reaction. Angola, Ukraine, for example. Once again, uh, clients are aware of the quality and they end up purchasing for us. We're more focused, of course, in Latin America, where we have a long-standing background. Now, I'll speak about Argentina at the end. We'll begin with the smaller countries. We have had a very good evolution in Colombia, in Bolivia. Well, Bolivia is what Paraguay was 15 years ago. Paraguay is an extension of Paraná. Bolivia is an extension of Mato Grosso, where the agriculture has developed at a better pace with significant evolution. Now, Bolivia has a very good potential in this business. Paraguay is more stable. They have a very good demand. They're very close to Paraná. We have been exporting to them for several years, and Paraguay, of course, has significant political stability and the country is becoming strengthened. Uruguay lies deep in our heart. They have a significant rice production, and we do have a relevant footprint, an interesting footprint in Uruguay. And finally, of course, we have Argentina. Argentina is a unique opportunity and it has changed everything. And we hope this tide will continue on. And there's a combination of extremely interesting factors. Well, agribusiness, for example, Argentina is able to plant with less fertilizers than Brazil and than United States. They have a highly efficient logistic, natural gas that is quite abundant. We were there visiting 2,000 kilometers in July. And well, in Brazil, this is a very difficult and costly process, but in Argentina, natural gas truly is very abundant. It's very similar to what we see in Europe. And Argentina, as a country, was closed for 20 years. If you visit the hinterlands of Argentina, as we did recently, the trucks are very old. It seems as if you have been taken back to the 1980s, a lack of organization. But all of this is working. All of the farms require updating. They need technology. They need to expand their capacity. And all that natural competitiveness of Argentina and the neglect that the country underwent in the last few years, we see that this has pushed Argentina to come to the market, and they will truly demand a great deal of storage, not only because of the size of production that is comparable to that of Mato Grosso. Argentina truly has a significant need to update its systems. We saw significant growth there between 2024 and 2025, and there has to be these structural changes. We have been in Argentina for 80 years. We're working with their rice productions and others for many, many years. If you have a question, if you could please raise your hand. Good morning. I'm an individual person, and thank you for taking my question.
I see that there's this demand, but there's a decisive factor, which is uh, corn ethanol really requires investment. And there's also been the ports issue, so it really requires investment. Do you see this change in scenario as Kepler, this change in the global scenario as a decisive factor, meaning the need for agriculture to invest in storage or even to develop wheat in Maranhão? I don't know if this is a player that will need that. I don't know if it's in the style of corn plants. Of course, investing in storage will be a requirement, but this challenge where you have a low income and a high interest, how do you identify that decisive factor? Hi, Gustavo. Thank you. We are very happy with individual investors joining us. This year was a very challenging year for agribusiness, but we had over 10,000 more individual investors joining us. So, first of all, the industrialization of Brazilian agribusiness was critical. We saw our business going from 50 to 360 million tons, so a shoot up. We also see the industrialization of the product at large being driven by biofuels. So it's definitely very important to look at the demand, this additional demand. And I also liked what you said, Antonio, which is we're only just beginning. I feel the same way. When you talk about canola, for example, Marcelo mentioned canola in Rio Grande do Sul. You can't have soybean and canola or corn and canola in the same silo. You need, of course, they have similar cycles, but each product will need a specific silo. So diversifying your crops, and we talked about sorghum. which is more in the Brazilian savanna, but this diversification of crops also brings additional demand. And the last thing you mentioned, Gustavo, which was also mentioned in Antonio's presentation, is very interesting. Very interesting to see how one thing sort of leads to the other. So the demand for biofuel within the decarbonization agenda also brings a significant opportunity, which led to corn, which led us to DDG. And you see cattle raising, which used to be so inefficient in Brazil with 200 million hectares of pastures that you needed to sort of gather, and then you had to store that DDG, which came as a help, but you had to store that within the farm. So that's like one thing leading to another, and that's what we see in agribusiness. That really grew in Brazil. It's had an amazing run in the last 25 years, and for the next 25 years, between the research for new product and new varieties, alongside this diversification, with the industrialization of agribusiness, that will bring a lot of opportunity for us. So I think the numbers will let up more quickly. I mean, it's impossible to double your corn-based ethanol production without investment in storage. So that's sort of in the package. Yeah, just adding to that, Bernardo, we calculate the storage deficit in a very simple way. You think about how much you produce and what's your distribution capacity. So first the farm, then the cooperative, Cargill or any other, and then the port. So I think Kepler is sort of the first and the last mile. It's from production to logistics, in addition to maintenance of every step in the chain, as well as the port. Yeah, the waterway. This is an entire chain for the protein. Sometimes we only think of farms, but think of how many steps and logistical steps. So you are sort of operating on both ends of that cycle. Did anyone ask to speak from this side? Okay, so once again, please. Yeah, I just have another question. Once Bernardo said something that I felt was very interesting. He said that in times of abundance, farmers first thought of buying more land, then of buying an apartment, and then investing in a new silo. So, what do you feel about that now? When you think about farmers, decision makers who are not on the institutional side, do you feel like they are more aware of the need to invest in silos or in storage within their own farms? You see the power of analogies, right, Gustavo? The apartment on the beach was in the sense of saying that they had more money to spend, so they were investing in buying airplanes or new apartments. But to your point, definitely their income is going down, but our volume's going up. I mean, now that we're moving out of these time of abundance, he's now prioritizing everything that adds value to their operation and reduces their risk. So we definitely see a larger volume in 2022 and 23. We are at a record level of production of silos and dryers and everything else. And we're going into 2026 on an upward trend. I mean, Jean won't let me overstate things, but we're going into 2026 with an order backlog that's a lot larger than what we had in the beginning of this year. Obviously, I'm not an expert in real estate, beachfront real estate, but I'm sure there's a dip in their situation while we are growing. Yeah, picking up on what you just said, Exactly. I was just at the beach in Santa Catarina and I saw many buildings uh, being raised and also in Itapema. But one interesting thing to say about decision making when it comes to storage, and that's something we didn't really go over during this Kepler Day, but in this Maslow pyramid that Bernardo brought, farmers have great expertise when it comes to working with the soil and productivity and machinery. So the storage discipline is still something new to them. So XP brought the concept of advice, helping Brazilians to invest in other assets than savings. And the same thing applied to us, going in and say, well, you can apply or you can invest in your silo or a different structure, and you have someone to support you on your decision making. So we're also adding an element of encouragement to farmers in terms of investing, knowing there'll be someone on their side to add advice and knowledge in a technology that will be he'll be able to rely on throughout their journey, which is storage. Yeah, if you put yourself on the farmer's shoes, thinking you have this year long revenue, and you get part of that to invest uh, once a month, for 12, 13 times a month. And that could turn to zero if you don't manage that well, which is why the work of Procera really reassures us that, you will be able to manage that well so as not to incur any losses. So that also adds confidence for more investments. Yeah, Bernardo already talked in one of their answers about the portfolio, but we also received a lot of questions about that. So I wanted to ask you what elements would lead us to having a better portfolio than what we had in 2025? Well, there are two important factors to consider here. First of all, the industrialization of agribusiness, which we mentioned before. This larger portfolio is more biased toward ethanol-based projects, as we saw with San Martino. We saw that upward trend in agribusiness. Farmers are a bit more restrained. So the farmer's portfolio is going down a little bit. So the easy answer would be this portfolio that's looking more toward the industrialization of agribusiness and more ethanol based. That would be, considering the macroeconomic situation. But there's also the work that we're doing to become closer to clients, to have this more specific communication and to talk about the opportunities. So we see that very good coverage of the entire market, of every business that's being made in the Brazilian market. So we're seeing that share in 105 or 107%. So as Felipe said about San Martino, helping customers to better structure their solution in a more customized way, that also helps to increase the size of our addressable market. Does anyone else have a question or would like to take this opportunity to speak up? Hi, I'm Samuel Isaac. I'm an analyst here with XP. My question is focused on the farmer side. Of course, this is an industry where investments are a bit lower, but we're seeing some areas, especially in Mato Grosso or the Northeast, we're seeing this trend of growing cooperativism. So more and more farmers are coming together. So I wanted to hear from you if you're seeing this progress when it comes to storage, of maybe better demand than it would be were farmers not bonding together. So I just wanted to understand from the storage standpoint if you could see the increase in cooperativism in these border areas as a factor that it affects demand for you. Okay, I'll split the answer into parts. I think it's very important to reinforce when it comes to cooperatives, especially the south of the country, Paraná, Mato Grosso do Sul. We have highly professionalized cooperatives, very well structured, and they are some of our major customers. If you look at our last 5 years, the highest profitability we've had at Kepler, at least comes from at least five cooperatives. So this is a very important business or a very important sector in agribusiness that's where professionalism is growing and adding value. So we have different companies, especially in Paraná and Mato Grosso do Sul, and that's very clear and will continue. With regards to buying pools, as we see with farmers in Mato Grosso or the Mato Piba area, that's a trend that we see less often with Kepler than we see with additives or fertilizers, with Bayer, for example. In that case, farmers like to see or like to have the asset uh, in house in their farms. So we see farmers pulling together to be more efficient. But this is not a trend that wows us in terms of boosting demand. Maybe adding to that, I talked a little bit about leases. We traveled around Mato Grosso a little bit and gathered together a few of the local farmers to present our model. And what became very clear to us is everyone had the same question. Would you not like to have a unit? Well, all of them did. Every farmer wanted one of those. And the reason why for farmers the lease issue is not as popular is farmers, especially smaller farmers, they're very focused on ownership and property. And that's very interesting. So, in the first part of the year, that was something we learned. Maybe leases will make more sense for major players or sometimes cooperatives than it will for those small farmers whose dream it is to store their own production in their own farm. So it's interesting to see this organization in groups, even thinking about unions. Itapura has, these smaller, maybe not small really, but Mato Grosso has some of these smaller farmers who have not found the opportunity to make this investment. But we're aware that that's something everyone wants. So it might be a matter of maturity or a change in culture until we come to a point where instead of investing in owning a silo, they will be interested in leasing one, which is something we are fostering and talking about. But it was interesting to understand that ultimately farmers want to have their own units and they sometimes organize in groups or unions, but this is still part of their culture, especially for smaller farmers.
Well, we saw exactly what you saw in Tangará, Primavera, and so who is Josizo, but this time very focused on the inputs for the units. In all the units, the silos are the same. People come together for their purchases, for purchase pools. There's normally the leader from a group. Now, here we had a movement that dates back some years in Paraná, especially of condominiums created by producers, and they set up a cooperative. And at that time, they had acquired a series of units. But in Mato Grosso, none of these events were repeated. Farmers will get together for the purchase of products. And of course, there's the influence of people that are here, like Kepler and others. Now in Mato Grosso, the groups are all very large. We have an additional question here, and then we will go on to our closing remarks. Good morning. I would like to speak about these new silos. When we speak with the producers, what is truly a bottleneck on their fields is the labor, the price of labor. And for those producers who have more automated silos in the south, you see that there's an enormous gap. Therefore, how can you give a greater thrust to replenishment and services going forward? Because I think the producers need to close that gap. Well, I can begin here, Pedro. Yes, thank you for your question. We have spoken somewhat about the units, and most of the units are still very old facilities that require a great deal of automation that could increase the productivity and profitability of the unit through the use of automation, as we showed you here. And this is a very fertile market for replenishment and services market. Now, besides the automations, there is another point. Before doing automations, what we need is to focus on security. The standards have changed significantly in the country, and there is ever stringent supervision. For example, this movement began in Paraná and Mato Grosso, and doubtlessly this will allow for the growth of replenishment and services. First of all, adjusting the units with automation and much more, but alongside that, the issue of these standards. Now, the best moment for me in this morning, and we have a slide showing you the reduction of labor, and I saw João Marcelo take a picture of that. That was a priceless moment for me in the morning. He's going to call his team and try to implement some changes. Now, we speak to a very large number of clients, 200, 300 clients a year, and all of them want automation. That's very common. And this streamlining has these two aspects. Pedro has already spoken about that, the streamlining of units that end up becoming inoperable. And the second part, in sales, what is happening? We're having a migration of OPEX to CAPEX. The client is thinking, I'm going to spend 30% more from the start, and I'm going to save in my operational costs in the future. So this is a financial account, a financial offset. And if you look at cooperatives, for example, they have 800 fixed people only working in their storage units, besides the temporary workers in other units. And it's become very difficult to accompany the growth of the business. Well, additionally to this, we're speaking about layers. There's that awareness that has already set in. We worked for 10 months in a unit where everything was going to be automated and they were going to work with a single person. Well, the initial cost of this is extremely steep. So they have to find what is possible. Uh, there has to be a transition when you're working with a new unit, and you have to make adjustments. You have automation, as Murilo showed us, automation of part of the unit, but there's that additional layer. We launched the BioCab with shavings, with chips that automates perhaps the unhealthier part of the operation. Now, that truly is the unhealthiest part of the unit. And so you automate your unit working in layers and you do it gradually. You simply cannot automate 17,000 units overnight. So they tend to work based on these different layers. Now, they began using BioCab in their units to begin with this transition, and the shavings of chips were fed manually to keep the operation operating. So, full automation in the units will only happen through this process of layering gradually. We've heard of large client cooperatives in Paraná. We've heard reports where they say we were used to only offering 30 positions and we're now receiving 300 requests to fill in our vacancies. So labor will truly no longer be available to operate all the units manually. And another important point mentioned by one of these cooperatives is that moment of the harvest. In one of the units, they simply did not have the people to operate all that because of their installed capacity. And in our units with automation, we have already presented further solutions to one of the main producers in Brazil, for example. Now, in a very sound way, this uh, unit is automating everything, standardizing everything. And well, of course, what we're going to do is scale all of this up. They have more than 2,500 units. Kepler has already worked with 10,000 units, and Kepler is used to working with new units. So, this automation of units is one of the main pillars for growth for our company. We said that would be the last question before closing, but we seem to have another question that we will take. And well, and then we will go to our closing remarks. Congratulations for the event, a truly winning event. Well, we've heard so many interesting things this morning. I'd like to know about 2026 for Kepler. As João Marcelo mentioned, because of everything that we're undergoing with our macroeconomic situation, well, we're going to have to see what we do. We have an incredible harvest, and perhaps we'll have to learn how to work with lower margins. So, as Bernardo mentioned, there's another year for the growth of your portfolio. You have had an increase in your revenue. And the question is, in the face of this very complex situation, you need a resumption of your revenue. But I understand that this growth in revenue will still not generate the operational leverage that you want. Well, let's go back to the image of the airplane. We see that credit will still be too expensive. And in the agribusiness, of course, we will continue to have risk aversion. Now, the cost may have a slight drop, but this will be for revenue of 2027 and not 2026 because we will be working with new accounts only in the second half of the year. And what we foresee in our accounts is stability. We see in terms of commodities, a positive situation, industrialization of agribusiness should become a new stream. But from the viewpoint of profitability, we do think that there will be an increase and a dilution of costs. So the scenario will be very similar to the scenario we had in 2025. The company has become much more efficient presently vis-à-vis last year or 2023. Now, we cannot do away with crisis without having some sort of enhancement. So we believe that the year 2026 will be very similar to the year 2025 because of what we have learned. Well, we're expanding our leadership. This is something we cannot do without. Now, things can improve or perhaps become more exacerbated, but we believe the seasonality will be very similar to what we saw in 2025. We practically didn't have this seasonality because of a surplus of demand in truth this year. I'm optimistic for the long term. In the short term, I continue to be cautious. I wouldn't say skeptical, but I continue to be cautious. This year was better than last year. We're going to enter 2026 with higher volumes, but today I can't say that what will be happening in April. What I think is rather serious is that this is our second year of reduced margins, and we would be going into a third year. So this sort of takes away your wind. A company that was very healthy will simply be a healthy company, and then there is that uh, dip. We're going to focus on cost, we're going to focus on efficiency, and of course, celebrate this portfolio that we have. The interest rates will not have an impact on 2026 for us. The impact will be in 2027. And the average interest rate will go from 15 to 12 perhaps, or it will stand at 13.5. So basically, it will end up being positive. Very well. We would like to thank all of you for your questions and remind you that we have the QR code on the screen so that we can hear your feedback. We would like to know if it was positive, how we can improve, and we would be very thankful if all of you would give us your opinion regarding the event. Thank you very much for your attendance. Sandra, Hitson, and all of us planned this event very carefully. I would like to thank our teams. Persistent. So we want to maintain that pace of leadership and our importance in the market. And Marcelo referred to the new products, the chain, uh, livestock. Now, I consider myself to be a person in agribusiness. I have been involved in agribusiness for 40 years, my entire life. And if somebody had told me 10 years ago where Brazil would be, I truly would not have believed this in terms of the corn, for example. Um, and all of this generates an abundance of opportunities for everybody. We've spoken about canola. Very shortly, there will be an explosion, a boom in canola. It will become one of the main players. Well, this is, it was said that in Brazil, all of the players are top, they're highly qualified, but I believe this was in the context of soccer.
So that's what this spirit of possibility is about. It's not everywhere in Brazil that we enjoy this spirit of possibility that we live in agribusiness, especially when it comes to storage. And then Kepler, our very dear Kepler, is still playing a huge leading role not only in Brazil's most important business, but the most important segment within Brazil's most important business. So we remain at a leading position. This year, completing 100 years hand in hand with Brazilian soybean production, which is also turning 100 years old, starting in Santa Rosa and Rio Grande do Sul and taking Brazil by storm. That's our history, that's our leadership, a role model, a brand that could be placed beside any brand such as Harley Davidson or John Deere in agribusiness. Now, thinking about our current time, I hope we've been able to convey this to all of you. Kepler has been able to balance short term challenges, finding ways to be more efficiency in outsourcing. We should save about 7 million reais in outsourcing to live this more adverse time in a good way, while at the same time not taking our feet off the gas. You know, with digitalization, we're finding short-term efficiency and also generating value in the medium to long term. I hope that was clear to all of you. I'll also go back to where I started. This is Thanksgiving, so I'd like to end by thanking the entire Kepler team. We usually say that our team is orange blood. This is an extremely dedicated and committed team. I'm talking about something that really transcends anything that could be considered normal. People talk about Google, where you have ping pong tables or food available to no end, but I can assure you that our team is a lot more engaged by any standard. One example, one of our past sales directors, I think it was in 2016, it was a time of crisis, and the client says, well, we'll give you an advance because you're doing well. Well, he went to the bank and pawned his own house. He mortgaged his own house, saying, well, if Kepler doesn't deliver to you, you can take my house. And I mean, there's no employee anywhere who would do something like that. So that's just one example of how engaged and how deeply committed our associates are. Marcos with the Schwartz family, his family has been with the company for 100 years. His grandfather, his great-grandfather, his father, they've been with us for 30 years. So this really is a unique business, and it really fills us with pride. Our oldest employee has been with us for 55 years, and he is one of our greatest salespeople. He's been with us for 55 years. He's seen everything. So it's an amazing team, and I'd like to thank all of you. And it sounds like a joke, when we show you the slides, it seems so beautiful. We have the airplane, but this is hard work. It's day in and day out. It's, trucks coming in and out in the cold, in the rain, with this 270 construction projects being delivered at the same time. So it's a miracle what happens thanks to our team. So I wanted to say a deep, deep, heartfelt thank you to all our professionals across our chain. And lastly, I'd also like to thank all our investors for their interest and their trust. We have some very old time investors here. It's a huge pleasure to have you with us. You're very, very important to us. Thank you so much.